one and all and everyone. Welcome to our new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies, where we are also talking about a new movie, Kong Skull Island.
That's right. We're not coming in late on this one. This
well,
movie,
a little late.
This movie it just came out. It just came out.
But I think by the end of this episode, you will all agree that we're not really late because this movie will age like a fine wine. Right, Dakota?
I hope so. Not like Velveeta cheese.
Yeah. Velveeta cheese, I used to think was a magical thing. And then you get older and you realize it's not cheese. And it just wants to plug you up. What is that stuff? How can it be a quote-unquote cheese and you don't have to put it in the fridge? It's freaky.
I don't know. It used to blow my mind because growing up, it was the only cheese you could put in the microwave, and it wouldn't come out warped. It would actually come out somewhat decent.
But that's also a warning. Why is it fine? Oh, well, on that creepy note, on to the creepy movie.
Yes. Much like a character in this movie, it's able to survive massive amounts of radiation, I guess.
Yes. So, we're going to jump right into it here, though, our review of Kong Skull Island. Dakota, when did you first hear about this movie? It's been kind of talked about for a while now. When did it come onto your radar that this was happening?
It was actually right after the Oscars a couple of years ago because Michael Keaton he had just starred in Birdman, and everyone was talking about Michael Keaton again. And everyone kept asking, well, what's your next big project? And he said this was it. I'm not sure who he was supposed to play, but he dropped out. And I'm actually kind of ashamed of myself because when I heard that they were making this movie, I immediately said, what? That is the dumbest idea I have ever heard. And never have I been so wrong.
Yeah, Michael Keaton and J.K. Simmons were both actually early on attached to this movie. And then apparently John C. Reilly took over the role that Keaton was going to have.
Oh, I wondered about that.
And Samuel L. Jackson replaced J.K. Simmons. So that's...
I think I would have preferred those two original actors.
It's hard to say without giving away where we're probably going to go in our review a little bit. I did enjoy John C. Reilly.
Yeah.
He really chewed up the scenes he was in.
It's been a long time since we had a good kind of comedic performance, though, for Michael Keaton.
It's true. It's true.
I think with those crazy eyes he could do, he probably maybe did a little better.
Probably the last one I remember is Herbie Fully Loaded.
Oh, my God.
Just kidding. It wasn't that. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I'm wondering if what some of the change was this movie was originally just going to be called Skull Island.
Yeah, and I had heard, I don't know if this was, they kind of changed up the concept, but I had heard that it was essentially a prequel to the Peter Jackson movie that came out a few years ago.
That was kind of the grapevine was that, yeah, it was going to be, a prequel to that one, which would have had it set in the 20s, if not earlier. And so, because Peter Jackson movie takes place in, 1933? 32?
Yeah.
Something like that. And so, yeah, that would have just changed a lot, because this movie, Kong Skull Island, the one that is now in theaters and came to fruition, takes place in 1973. Kind of right after Vietnam has ended. The Vietnam conflict, I should say.
Yeah, one thing that I find a little underwhelming about the marketing for this movie is nobody was really talking about the setup for this movie. Like, the troops that you see in this movie are coming directly off the end of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, they're like not even coming from America. It's like They're going to be going home after Vietnam ended, but instead go right to this. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting. And Samuel Jackson plays their what is he, a colonel?
Yeah, he's a colonel.
And he's kind of their head up. And he is wound like the tightest wound toy. I mean, they really utilize Samuel Jackson's crazy eyes in this movie, at least I thought, where you could just see how he was on edge and how they kind of explain that was he's a very decorated colonel, and he just saw that he just felt like all of his accolades and all of his work and all of his sacrifices and all his men's sacrifices were for nothing, because when somebody brings up losing, that they lost the war, he goes, we didn't lose it, we abandoned it. Like, he kind of had this mentality like, it wasn't over, they just quit, and I don't want to quit, kind of thing. And he kind of jumped onto this opportunity to come and be the military escort on this journey as kind of like, oh, I can stay in it and be a part of another thing, not even knowing at that point that they would come across, there be monsters in these lands. And so, because kind of what the setup is we're introduced to John Goodman and his kind of scientific partner, kind of one of the guys right under him, who John Goodman brings onto his team because he wrote a paper with this theory. And John Goodman is basically a monster hunter. Like, he's a guy who's trying to convince the government that there's still monsters in existence and that we need to protect ourselves from them. And so he's trying to get the funding to go check out this island that was discovered because of the new invention known as satellite technology, where they got a picture of this island from space, and they saw that it's undiscovered because it's surrounded by constant stormy fog, which I thought was kind of interesting way to explain that. And so they kind of get together this ragtag group that includes Samuel Jackson's military crew. They recruit Tom Hiddleston to be kind of the unknown land tracker man, and then Brie Larson's character jumps on as a war photographer who something just doesn't seem right, because they're trying to pass this off as a scientific expedition, and she feels like there's something more there. And so even though she's this war photographer, she jumps on this thing to be the photographer for it, of something that just seems really low-key sciencey trip. And so that's kind of the setup coming into this. And then it pretty much takes off from there. You have that setup. I mean, is that how you felt, Dakota? They did not hide King Kong. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I felt like Warner Brothers kind of learned their lesson with the Godzilla movie, where they kind of maybe corrected things that they should have done in the Godzilla movie. Just for people who don't know, the Godzilla movie that came out a couple of years ago, directed by Gareth Edwards, is set in the same universe as this movie.
Yes. Yep. In fact, the company that John Goodman works for, Monarch, is also the company from Godzilla that the Asian character Ken Watanabe is working for. So this is a movie that's taking place before the events of Godzilla, but we're seeing that there's these kind of connection points, and so you're kind of asking like, okay, what's the deal here? How is this going to work? And so yeah, they're developing this whole universe here with these characters, but really what was surprising and kind of unexpectedly nice was how, we're not going to have them wander around for a half an hour on this island and then you'll see a couple whoosh whoosh, but it was just like King Kong comes on the scene pretty quick and is King Konging it up. And it is quite spectacular in a jarringly violent sort of way. and so you're introduced to King Kong as being gigantic. He's huge. He's like 100 feet tall and is just tearing things apart and is just ravaging these people right from the get-go. And so you're kind of asking yourself, like, okay, so what is King Kong going to be in this movie? Is he the villain or is he the hero? You know, what's going on? Because this first scene, you just see the absolute strength of King Kong, which sets up the whole idea that he is the king, and that it will, like, there isn't, is man a match for this monster? And so I don't know, I thought that was a pretty cool introduction. How'd you feel about that introduction of King Kong happening just so quick and like wha-bam, Dakota?
It was actually pretty intense. That's the closest thing I could come to describing it, because there's kind of this neat little scene where, you know, these helicopters are flying through the air in this really cool formation.
Looks very Vietnam-y.
There's a great song from Black Sabbath playing in the background. And then, yeah, chaos ensues just literally within the blink of an eye. People are dying. That's something that this movie kind of did really well. It would go from kind of one emotion. It would give you like one emotion, and then next thing you know, it'd have you like jumping or laughing. But yeah, the scene where he takes on the helicopters, it's shown in the trailer quite a bit, but it doesn't prepare you for what happens. And it's just, I guess the word I'm looking for is stunning.
Yeah, and I think this director, I don't know, Dakota, were you familiar with this director, Jordan Vogt Roberts or Vought Roberts?
No, not at all. I don't even think I heard that name before.
Yeah, it's another case where he had done a movie a few years ago called The Kings of Summer that got a lot of kind of film festival attention, and I think this was his first big movie, but I'm wondering if they picked him just because he had this vision, because, man, the look of this movie was pretty neat. I like the way they use, I don't know, a lot of you maybe have seen the poster. We've seen the poster for it where it's like this giant silhouette of Kong kind of standing in front of the setting sun, you know? And there was like just kind of a lot of neat visuals used in that way. And you just got a lot of really interesting moment shots. It's kind of how I felt. But I thought also when it was brought into the whole of everything else that sometimes moment shots, when directors do those, are like, they're so like jarring, because it's like we cut to this moment shot and then we cut back and cut. But it's like, I like the way he kind of like, it was kind of all flawlessly kind of put all together. I really liked kind of just how that looked and how smoothly it all went together, how it kind of cut from, like the helicopter, one of the helicopters is falling and it's like, well, crashing would be a better word. And so it's like crashing, but it's upside down, and they've shown you this bobblehead of Richard Nixon a few times. And there's just this few second shot of, as it's crashing upside down, of showing the Richard Nixon bobblehead upside down and like the head bobbling. And it's like, that shot didn't really mean anything, but it also didn't take away, and it just kind of added like something like we were familiar with, and then he just kind of cuts to that, and I don't know, it just kind of had like some shots like that. This kind of made it all kind of look neat and kind of have an originality to it. I don't know, what'd you feel about kind of just the look of the movie?
I thought it was pretty good overall. Talking about how he shot some of these things, it was interesting because he used a lot of different camera angles. When one of the helicopters going down, there's almost like a POV point of view shot from inside the helicopter.
Yeah, that was pretty neat.
And then, of course, the people inside survive. Unfortunately, Kong is still out there, so he then destroys the helicopter, which is like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm feeling all these emotions right now.
You're in the helicopter, and it's like kind of shaking a little bit, and then you just see out the door of the helicopter, everything is just spinning wildly, and then all of a sudden you start catching shots of like a furry leg, being lifted up, and you're just getting this total point of view of like being in that helicopter. It was almost like a ride, but it was really putting you into the movie, and it was just kind of neat because I think this is one of those movies where you can't compare it to Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List or something. You need to understand that, like, okay, this is just a goofy, over-the-top action monster movie, and that there's going to be just ridiculous carnage. And I think if you go in with that attitude, it's like you understand it's all just done for just the spectacle, I guess.
I think the part of it, though, is people may have gone to this not sure what to expect. I mean, we went to it. I don't know about you, but I was just kind of expecting, monster movie. These people, essentially something along the lines of Jurassic Park, but with
little bit,
but with a lot more guns and a lot more Samuel L. Jackson and
yeah, because he's in Jurassic Park, I guess.
Yeah, and just more violence and more monsters and then they threw in little touches of horror, a lot of comedic moments. And then one thing I thought was cool was just like the dialogue kind of back and forth between the characters. There wasn't really a dull moment in this movie. Sometimes there's...
Yeah, in the dialogue, you're right, it was pretty naturalistic.
Yeah,
like the way it moved between them. Like, for a movie that's relying more on, we know you're just here for the big monkey, that there actually was a movement of the dialogue that felt not clunky, and kind of naturalistic to who they were supposed to be in the movie. And yeah, that was kind of interesting. I didn't think about that aspect so much. I guess as far as, okay, we kind of brought that up, is, okay, so in this movie we had John Goodman, Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Samuel Jackson. Those were kind of the main heavy hitter 4 movie stars, I would say, that were in this movie. And then they're backed up by a lot of people that you recognize them from this, that, and the other thing. How did you feel about that? How did you feel about the human element to this movie, Dakota? Like the people within the characters, how the characters were, their arcs, things like that.
It was all really incredible because I don't think there was really a character in this movie that was wasted. It seems like
there's a lot that were wasted.
Well, they were cannon fodder. Come on. That's what
by wasted I mean any of you Star Trek fans, you want to talk about, there were a lot of red shirts in this movie. Yeah, sorry, go on.
90% of the people you see in this movie are red shirts, I guess. Oh, man. But no, it's just, there weren't any kind of people who were there who were talking just to, like, fill up screen time. It was all kind of just, it seemed just really natural the way characters would talk to other, or a soldier talking to another soldier. Some nerd who's never been in any sort of situation under stress talking to another scientist. People completely out of their element who are essentially saying, I'm not even supposed to be here today. And just,
Yeah, you had the classic, I should just be behind my desk guy. Yeah.
Then you have the guy who should have been behind his desk saying, oh, I'm going to run with the big dogs today.
Yeah.
Guess what happens to him?
So, yeah, and I thought they handled the human element fairly well in this. There were a few things that were maybe over the top a little bit. But when you take into account that those certain over the top things fit into the fact that you were at a monster movie, It didn't really, I think, hurt it. And I felt like, for the most part, you understood the intentions and got to know the characters that you needed to know well enough to at least have some sort of attachment to them. Probably the weakest of the mains, I would say, would be Brie Larson. And I don't even think it's her fault. I think she was fine. It was just like, I think they were just, maybe they just struggled to know exactly with what to do with her, because she was the photographer person. But I think there were just times where it seemed like they weren't quite sure what to do with her, but they didn't want her also to just be the love interest, or the damsel in distress. And so it kind of almost ended up, and she wasn't Machine Gun Kelly or whatever, and so it almost put her in this place where it left her in this nebulous of, she didn't always have that much to do. Do you know what I mean? Because she wasn't this type of female, or like the Ripley character type thing. She wasn't on either side. And so I don't know. I mean, I thought she was fine.
Yeah.
But it just kind of left her, unfortunately, kind of lost in the middle, I thought.
Yeah, I don't know what really the thinking was behind her. Other than the fact that, King Kong kind of has a thing for blondes. I mean, even in this movie, it shows a little bit. I think she's essentially there to just kind of harken back to the films of yore, really.
Yeah, I was glad that they toned that back. The whole King Kong having a thing for the lady.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad because they really kind of overdid that to almost like a creepy level in Peter Jackson's, where it was like, you almost felt like they were in love at times in Peter Jackson's, which was kind of weird. Well, it was weird, not kind of. And so I was glad that they toned that back. And another interesting thing was, I wanted to bring up, is, how did you feel about Tom Hiddleston as being like the testosterone leading man of this movie?
He kind of slid into that role very comfortably, and I didn't feel like he was out of place. So he handled himself really well in such a way that it was a little surprising.
Yeah, I was surprised too, because I honestly thought it was gonna be more like Adrian Brody in that Predator movie.
Oh yeah,
where it's like, I don't know if he's really gonna work, just because he just seems. And I think it's because most of my Tom Hiddleston experience is with him as like the slimy, use my brains, not my brawn, Loki. And then Thor was the brawn, and so he was always kind of this weaselly guy in most things. So I was kind of like, when I saw he was like supposed to be the lead muscle man, is like, I don't know about this. But yeah, it was surprising how well he fit. And, he still had his British accent. He was still playing a British man. And even that, I felt like he found a way to use his British accent that sounded like manlier than like his Loki British, where it just sounded a little more like, yeah, I'm a guy who can hold my own. So yeah, that I found interesting. Now, we had mentioned, I had mentioned Samuel Jackson. How did you like him as the kind of wound colonel?
Oh, he was honestly a little too perfect, I thought.
How do you feel about Samuel Jackson being in every movie? Does that bother you? Or are you one of those people where it's like, why is he in everything?
Well, I'm okay with it. Problem is, sometimes he's not really acting. Like in this movie, he was required to act a little bit, but sometimes it's like he's just there to remind people that he's still around. It's like somebody should just tell him, "Hey, we all know who you are. We all love seeing you. You don't got to be in like 10 movies every year, man."
Yeah, there's been like a couple of comic book movies he's in, and not the Captain America, Nick Fury roles, but like The Spirit and Kingsman. Where I know those were ones where people were like, yeah, he doesn't have to be in everything, whatever. But yeah, you're right. In this movie, it did feel like, yeah, he was playing it well, and he did fit. He did fit where it wasn't like, hey, it's Samuel L. Jackson, and he's just yelling. Like, he really didn't yell in this movie. He was playing the part he's supposed to play. A guy who was trying to keep war going because he didn't know what else to do with himself. Really, or, you know, and have really an identity outside of that. And so, yeah, it was kind of like the first time I've really seen him act since maybe Unbreakable. You know, actually.
Wow, now that you say that, yeah, I can't think of anything in the last couple of years.
Otherwise, he's always kind of Samuel Jackson, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was kind of... And then John Goodman, I just felt the whole time like he was basically playing a slightly different version of his 10 Cloverfield Lane character. Like, you all think I'm crazy, but I'll prove that I'm right, or something.
Well, they don't... It's never kind of said, but I feel like he was just going through post-traumatic stress. That was... Obviously, that's back then when it was never treated. And it just like...
Well, Vietnam's would help bring awareness to it a little more.
Yeah, and essentially, I did think that was cool. In the very beginning of the movie, you do see a shot of him when he was younger.
Yeah, it looked like a shot from Roseanne. Or something. Like his face looked like it did in Roseanne.
And it was like supposed to be when he was in his... You find out later his character was in the Navy.
Yeah, that's right, the Navy, yep.
Yeah, and it's like... Oh man, that face does not say Navy at all.
No, and what's funny is like he's lost some weight, you know, as of late, and it's like he looked heavier in his younger picture than he did in the movie, which was I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, and so like I said, I mean everybody was fine. Like we mentioned, there's a lot of cannon fodder. Now let's move on to some of the more other stars of the movie, the creatures. Creature, how did you feel about how the creatures looked?
You know, they actually looked pretty good. I was a little worried they were kind of just going to be kind of a lot like the Mutos from the Godzilla movie where they looked a little derivative from the Cloverfield monster.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, yep.
There's like a lot of a kind of odd variety of monsters on this island, from this weird giant spider to there's a scene in the movie where Kong takes on this mythical beast, so that was odd. And then
there's like a log bug. Yeah, there's like a lot of giant water buffaloes and
the bloodthirsty birds that look like dinosaurs.
Yeah, a lot of different things in this movie. And then, the main creature outside of Kong that's focused on is these underground dwelling creatures. Which, do they ever give them a name? I don't think they do.
Skull crawlers, I believe.
Oh, yeah, skull crawlers, which John C. Reilly just made up. Like, on the spot. So, but, they... I guess I felt like the skull crawlers, I guess we'll just call them, did look like a lot of other types of creatures you see like that in movies. But I thought they were still, you know, I mean, they were very intimidating looking still, and I guess I thought I wasn't put off by the CGI. Like obviously this was CGI. They don't do the big monkey suits anymore and try to make a guy, you know, like a guy run around in a monkey suit or something. And so I thought I wasn't distracted by bad CGI or anything in any of the shots. And so I thought all that looked pretty well. And I thought some of the other types of creatures now they came up with, it was kind of interesting, just things they came up with to make moments in the movie and kind of make this land that time forgot of sorts. And so, it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, if anything, I was a little disappointed. Or I shouldn't say I was disappointed, but I was expecting at least some sort of dinosaur to be roaming this island, but
Yeah, I think they feel like the dinosaur thing has been done,
yeah.
so maybe they want to try something different, which was fine because there's still a Triceratops skull you see in one shot, so it kind of reminds you like, oh, they were around. We could still have them eventually, but we're gonna take a dinosaur break. There's been enough dinosaurs in movies lately, but yeah, that was kind of interesting. And then of course, you got to have the natives. There's always the Skull Island natives, which I liked the new take on the island natives. Did you like kind of how they decided to do the natives in this movie?
Yeah, they honestly just seem like kind of tribes you would find on any island in the South
Pacific?
Yeah, South Pacific, which seemed a little more natural.
Yeah, I like that, and I liked how they just weren't like psychotic spear throwing killers.
Yeah.
You know, like that they were still, whatever you want to call it, a superstitious type primitive tribe, but that they weren't themselves like creatures that the explorers had depicted, but they were still humans. There was still like this human element to them, and it was kind of an interesting new take on that, which was nice. And so I guess I don't know what would be your do you have really any what is your, without being too spoilery, what do you think was the best thing about this movie, Dakota, and what do you think was the worst thing about this movie?
Well, easily the best was probably Kong himself. They really kind of just went for it with him. They didn't make him kind of just like, oh, we're gonna go with a more how a gorilla would naturally be, and that's why I remember where he just kind of, no, he like runs and he climbs on mountains and he's just all over the place, and
yeah, he's a biped in this movie,
and
yeah,
he actually uses weapons when fighting.
Yes.
And that was just cool. And
yes, that was really sweet.
this is a Kong movie after all, and he worked pretty well. Almost to the point where I kind of was expecting for him to be the villainous, but he's not. Is he the hero? That's what I'm struggling with right now. But no, I thought he was easily the best part. Him and Samuel L. Jackson, I guess.
All right. And then what do you think was like the weakest or worst thing?
Oh, that would easily be kind of this anti-war message they tacked on and tried to subvertly send your way every now and then. Shea Wiggum, I think is how you pronounce his name, who's an actor who's been like a ton of things, Boardwalk Empire. Kind of has this little story he tells about why he carries an AK-47. Then he says something along the lines of, sometimes the enemy doesn't exist till you go looking for him. No, sometimes the enemy exists. Just exists. You got to go find him.
You're right. There were a few spots where it was like, that was kind of forced, and
yeah.
It's true because most of the things, with the characters are done pretty like I said, naturalistic, but it felt like those were like some of them just kind of like it barely worked or something, and yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like every probably about 15 minutes they were trying. I'd say that was only.
It was like they had to remind us that Vietnam was a disaster. It's like, well, we all know that was a disaster.
I feel like the only reason the song "War" wasn't in this movie is because it probably would have been too on the nose. Like,
yeah.
No, we got to do it very subtly. We can't let them know this is anti-war rhetoric we're sending at you.
We'll just keep showing the Richard Nixon bobblehead or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What a lot of people forget is probably the best thing about Richard Nixon was that he was
a conservationist.
Well, and he was good at international relations. He actually was pretty good at talking with China and making things work and stuff. But
I heard that the Vulcans have a saying: only Nixon could go to China.
Yeah, it's just that kind of got overshadowed by a few other things, and his, he's a little bit paranoid. Anyway, yeah, for myself, best thing about this movie were there were just my best thing kind of comes down to using the term moments, but I mean it in the term like there were just a lot. I guess I was just surprised by how many amazing moments that they made in this movie that all came together into one big spectacle and kind of worked together, and to kind of give it this feel that was so different, because I think one of the things that hurt Godzilla a little bit, and Gareth Edwards must just be his thing because he kind of did with Rogue One a little bit, is that it was so like overly heavily serious feeling the whole time that it was like you kind of forgot about the funness of going to a creature feature. And I just feel like there were so many moments in this movie that even though you were feeling kind of the horror of the scariness of it all, that it was still, they remembered to bring in just the fun spectacle of it all. And I just really enjoyed that. I think that's the most positive thing about this movie. Is just how they created so many fun moments that came together into the movie. And I would say probably negative would be just a few little things with, I think I just would have, I don't know, this is kind of maybe a nitpick, but just kind of, like I said, I just kind of felt like maybe some of the creatures were in the way. They did a few things that those were a little redundant from other things, but it probably is hard to think of something real original and to do when you're kind of in this type of thing. And so I don't know, it's kind of hard to say, because when you take this movie for what it is, it's hard to be really hard on it. If you were sitting here thinking like, I'm going to go watch this as if it's going to be an Oscar contender, well, then, yeah, I'm going to see a lot of things wrong with this movie. Like, oh, this will never be, like this. But when you look at it for what it is, it's like, that was a pretty fun ride, And so I think it's kind of hard when you put that into perspective. But I would agree with you, Dakota, that you're right, that like there are a few times where it's like, we get it. Vietnam was bad. War is bad. But then in the next minute, they're all throwing grenades and shooting machine guns. And so, I mean, who knows what's going on? But, yeah, so overall, Dakota, what would you give this?
I would probably give this 3 stars.
Out of 4?
Yeah, 3 stars out of 4.
I'd be in the same boat. I would be, yeah, it's hard. Can we do a 5-star?
There you go.
Let's do 5 stars. So what would you give out of 5 stars?
Oh, man. I'd go 3.5.
Dang it. See, that's why I went to 5 stars, so that I could do 3.5 and be different from you. But,
I'll bump it up to 4 stars. 4 out of 5 stars.
See, now it doesn't feel genuine, though. But that's all right. Yeah, I would give it, like 3.5 out of 5 stars, because this isn't a masterpiece, but it's not meant to be a masterpiece. But it's still fun. It still looks great. And I thought this director had a really interesting touch that he gave to it. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens next with this whole universe world they're setting up and what this could mean for these monsters coming together. It'll be kind of fun to see where that leads, and if Samuel Jackson will defy age and somehow be in present day also. No. Or will he? You'll have to see this movie and find out.
It'll be his great-grandson.
Yeah. So, so we both give this a recommend. I would say see it in theaters. It's pretty fun to see it in theaters.
Oh, yeah.
On the big screen and kind of get that full eventness of it.
This is definitely one of those movies where you kind of, if you want to really enjoy it, you have to see it on the big screen.
Yeah. I think to more fully enjoy it, definitely, it kind of warrants that in a way with these types of movies. But yeah, if you just want to I just want to grow some hair on my chest really quick and feel manly, it's like this would be a good movie for that. Or if you got a jumpy lady friend that you want to be able to put your arm around a lot, this might be a good one for that too, because she might jump towards you a little bit. So, and if your girl is a jumpy boyfriend, hey, maybe you'll get your arm around him. Who's to say who's jumpy? There's some scaredy cat boys out there too. You know who you are. But yeah, with that, we hope you check us out on. We hope you check us out just in general. Dakota and I are some pretty good-looking guys. Unfortunately, we're both taken. But that being said,
Steven's being very generous on my behalf right now.
That being said, we hope you do check us out. The Dakota Boys Talk Movies, that is, on Facebook, on Twitter, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Stitcher. We're also on there if that's a place you like to use for listening to podcasts, and iTunes, of course, the big guy. And so, again, lately we've been noticing just some subscriber boosting, some view boostings on listening to some of our old episodes even. That is so awesome. We love that. Thank you for that.
I feel like that's mostly due to people seeing if we were serious about doing commentary for some of those movies.
Yeah. And that's another thing, we're not bad. We've done some commentaries in the past, which is where we literally watch the movie while talking at the same time, and then try to do it in a way where you could cue the movie and watch it while we talk about it. And so it's kind of a way where we're all there together watching the movie, but distracting you the whole time. But if there's one you'd like us to do of that, just let us know. Or if there's something you want us to review that's like, yeah, this movie's 20 years old, but hey, their show's called Talk Movies, not just Talk New Movies. Hey, we're up for it. We like some of the old movies too. In fact, some of our favorite movies are over 20 years old, or 30 years old, or 40 years old. So
some of them are even coming up on retirement age, I believe.
Yeah, depends on what your favorite movies are, but yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, when you think about the 60s being quite a few years ago now, so and 50s. But yeah, so let us know. Talk to us. We love it. And thanks a lot for listening and subscribing. And yeah, you can always just let us know anything on any of those places. And so with that, we'll close this show. So this is Steven.
And this is Dakota.
Take it easy and enjoy the movies.